Hello and welcome to episode 494 of the Awesome Comics Podcast, the place where the small press makes one hell of a big noise. My name is Vince Hunt, and joining me as always is the creator of the comic series Vanguard, Dan Butcher.
Hello.
And Tony Esmond. You have been marooned, crashed, and you're left on a desert island. How long is it before you start talking to a volleyball?
I'm not one of those people who talks to themselves, you know. A lot of people do.
What do you mean? You're saying Wilson isn't a real person?
Well, I know. I've said this to loads of my friends, and they say, "Oh, I always talk to myself." I have never talked to myself.
Fair enough.
Do you guys ever do it? I don't know whether I'm missing something in my life.
You sort of like you drop something, oh, you fucking knob. You call yourself like that. Do you ever do that? You know when you do something, you go, "Oh, well done."
I might go shit.
When you say that, Dan, do you speak about yourself in the third person? Do you went, Dan, you knob?
No, I don't say my name.
Do you use like a French accent or anything?
Oh, Dan. Oh no, I'm not doing it.
No, I don't. Let's not spin this up into a fantasy thing about me.
I will always spin it into a fantasy thing about you, Dan.
Dan draws a face on his penis and it sounds French.
It's a big face.
Oh, Lemire.
Very happy face. Looks like he's had some Botox. This is like Simon Cowell, 2024.
Jesus. Welcome to the show, everyone.
Welcome.
We are in a good mood this week, folks, and you should be too.
Buoyant.
We've just spoken to our last guest of the year, and I tell you what, if you came here for comic book chat, you are in for a treat, because there's
in the right place.
Loads of that. Because we got a chance to speak to the prolific and very knowledgeable Fred Van Lente.
He was good, wasn't he?
This week.
Wasn't he good?
Yeah. It just gets you like excited about comics and making comics, like from working with superheroes to learning about the process of comics and just everything in between. It's just an awesome chat. So, and there's loads of he's so prolific. There's loads of comics of his,
loads and loads
to check out in the ether. So, yeah, we'll get onto that soon.
Valiant comics.
I mean, you can probably check out, there's bound to be. There is a couple of his titles available.
Loads on there, actually.
On Global Comics, our lovely sponsor of the show, good old Global Comics. If you like reading your comics digitally, or sometimes you have to because you can't get close to a comic book store, or perhaps like me, you had a couple of days off work and you don't live close to a comic book store, and you decide, I'm going to read a stupid amount of comic books over this couple of days. So much
without moving from your couch.
Yeah, and so much so you actually forget what you've read, like hundreds and hundreds of pages. Well, you can read hundreds and hundreds of titles. They're available from thousands of indie creators, hundreds of publishers like Image, Boom, Tokyo Pop, TK Studios, Source Point Press, Humanoids, Dynamite, Dark Horse, and DC. That's to name but a few. There's fucking thousands of creators and stuff available on there. Chaps, what have you, while I was busy just reading loads of trade paperbacks and stuff, what did you notice this week?
I'm going to push people towards the Planet of the Apes comics.
Ooh.
Because there's almost the entire history of the Planet of the Apes comics on Global Comics. So you can go all the way from the Marvel, Mike Ploog, Tom Sutton, Herb Trimpe, Redondo 1970s series, which is honestly a thing of pure beauty in black and white on there. A script by my man, Doug Munch. And you can go all the way through the Boom series, which there's a couple of ongoings on there. Really, Gabriel Hardman does one, some really interesting stuff. And then there's the mini series as well. So as unusual as this may sound, you've got Planet of the Apes and the Green Lanterns, which is slightly unusual.
Okay,
I'll give you that.
Yes, I know.
Yeah, you've got the King Kong on the Planet of the Apes, which is a really good series, which I think was my pick on here about 2 years ago.
I remember that.
Yeah, that's good stuff. But there's loads on there. Go and do the Marvel black and white stuff. Jerry Conway, Doug Munch series, just beautiful stuff. Some of my favourite Tom Sutton art in there, just gorgeous. Yeah, there you go, Planet of the Apes. I love Planet of the Apes. I've always loved Planet of the Apes since I saw the original film as a kid, and it fucked me up. And then I watched the second one, and suddenly they're letting off nuclear bombs, and everyone's a fucking mutant, and I'm like, and then everyone dies at the end, and I'm like, what just happened? What is this all about?
scary that they built the Statue of Liberty on their planet as well.
Yeah, isn't it weird? Yeah.
It's well weird.
And then in the third one, they come back to our time, or what was my time then, the 70s, and they're dressing as humans. And I'm beginning to be slightly sexually aroused by that lady in it, you know.
Fair play.
But Planet of the Apes, I love Planet of the Apes. I love the cartoon. I love the TV series. I've got novels of it. Yeah, get on it.
I think I was first introduced to it at the TV series. You know, there's the two blokes knocking around on it, the blonde and the...
It's a bit like Starsky and Hutch do Planet of the Apes. Yeah.
I mean, that's a great TV series. If they had that car in it, it'd made it even better. But the Gran Torino with the red with the white stripe.
It's been a while since I watched the cartoon, but in that they have cars and stuff, don't they? It's like more modern Planet of the Apes in that one.
I can't even remember.
Yeah, I think so. It's a bit strange. I think you can get it on Blu-ray. There you go.
Oh, there you go.
What about you, Dan?
I'm going to circle back to it later, but Transformers, there's like a dozen issues of it on Global Comics, and I blasted through it this week. Oh, I love it. It's absolutely amazing. Such a great series. And that, Void Rivals, there's lots of the Energon Universe stuff on Global, and I recommend you go check it out.
Nice.
It's a good place to keep up with all that little universe, Global, I think.
I agree. Yeah.
And a good chance to catch up on some series that like people have just been going on about for a little while, the stuff that passes by.
But you can dip your toe in the water and see if it's for you. I mean,
might be a good time over Christmas just to get that free week or 3 month, whatever it is.
Gift a subscription to a friend. I mean, we were just talking, I won't say too much about it, but I checked out Nottingham, the entire saga of Nottingham. So we might hear more about that.
I started on that yesterday. I'm on that as well.
Yeah. I started it and just absolutely rinsed through it.
And you're at Prairie Gods as well.
Yeah. Very good.
Cool.
Yes. So many comics there. And it's also makes it so much easier because of the Global Comics app, where you can not only read all of these great titles, you can follow creators, set reading status filters, and release notifications for books you're looking forward to checking out in the future, or just when books are just releasing. Dan, how many notifications this week? Tony, I'm going to say he's got 52.
I'm going to go higher. I think I'll go 62.
Okay.
This might be because I've been on Global Comics this week. A lot of them are cleared. I've got none.
Oh,
what?
For God's sake!
My God!
Kind of put a bit.
Who
of a
are
spanner in
you?
the works there.
Man,
there was a lot earlier on. There was about 72.
Oh. Yep. If you follow a lot of creators, as Dan does, he wants to keep. There's loads of titles he wants to follow, and therefore Global Comics lets him know when those books are available, which is great. I mean, we joke about this bit and we ask Dan, but seriously, if you want to be kept available, know when the books are being added, it's a great service. Also, if you're a creator yourself, you can publish digital comics for free. There's loads of great tools for indie creators to help with publishing, marketing, and more. So if you're an average comics creator, or maybe just a comics reader, or someone just new to the hobby, or you want to get someone into the hobby, gift them a subscription service.
Yeah.
And if you want to find out more information, check out Global Comics. That's comics with an X.com. You can download the app now on the Apple App Store or Google Play, and they're constantly on top of it and updating it all the time. And their customer service is really great. Big thanks to them for supporting the show this year. And please do check them out because we're addicted. We're addicted to comics.
Great app, everything.
Yeah.
Or in the words of our T-shirt, reading comics till I die.
Yep.
I think I'm going to try updating Vanguard on it on the twice a week updates on Global as well as the main site to see
that'd be
how
good.
it works.
Oh, interesting.
I'm going to have to pick Matthew Schofield's brain on how he does that.
Yeah. And if you past guest, if you go back to our library,
possibly more coming about him soon.
Yeah. Whether he likes it or knows about it or not.
It'll be a news to him. He'll be listening.
He'll be like, what?
Really?
He'll be looking over his shoulder for the next couple of weeks. But no, we've got some great books to recommend and some more comic stuff to talk about later in the show. But right now, I think, as we were saying, there's some of his work on Global Comics.
There's loads of Valiant stuff on there. Otherwise,
And if you want to know more about all of his work, then check out this chat with the one and only Fred Van Lente. Right, this week we're joined by someone who not only is a multiple New York Times best-selling writer, but they've written for the likes of Marvel, Valiant, and Dynamite, created books such as Action Philosophers and the Comic Book History of Comics, an endless list of comic book credits, and they also co-authored a play about the one and only Jack Kirby. Who could this be? Well, it has to be the one and only Fred Van Lente. Welcome to the show, sir.
Thank you for having me, guys.
Yeah,
Pleasure, man.
yeah,
Pleasure.
totally.
Yeah.
Now, that's quite a list of credits, and if anyone just, I don't know, Googles your Wikipedia, there's so many comics that you...
7 pages on the Grand Comics database, I noticed. That's pretty good going, man.
That's great.
That sounds low, but yes,
They're big pages. They're big pages.
Yeah.
it's a lot. It keeps me off the streets, guys.
Oh, that's good. That's good. That's probably what a lot of comic writers would say. But let's kick it off with a fairly... I mean, we're going to get into some process. We're going to get into the books that you're currently working on and the new stuff, etc., as well as some teaching stuff. Yes, sure. Teaching, listeners. You'll be able to learn all kinds this week. But before we do that, let's start with, like, what is it about comic books? Because obviously you've done lots of other things in other media. What keeps you coming back to comics?
I mean, partly it's because it's where I'm the best known. My name has more cachet. It's hard, it's hard once you break into one medium to, suddenly say, I'm going to be a screenwriter or whatever. Obviously there are people like Robert Kirkman and Neil Gaiman who've been able to do that. But I just really love the medium. Honestly, I love artists. I love palling around with artists and talking to artists. I've known and lived with or around comics artists, like, literally since I left school. So it's just...
So I think I'm right in saying you went to film school originally, Fred, did you?
I did, yeah. I went to Syracuse to do film school, but I ended up hanging out with the likes of Steve Ellis and Ryan Dunleavy, 2 people I continue to work with this day. Notably, Ryan co-created the Action Philosophers and Comic History Comics, aforementioned. And we met at Syracuse, but it's just a great community. I also love the actual act of, like, making books, like the actual physicality of it and sending things to press. And I letter quite often my own comics, which is something else I really enjoy. I'm lettering a history of role-playing games that Tom Fowler and I are doing right now. So that's awesome. I think, part of the reason I hated film school so much was that I'm not technical. So, like, this is the early 90s, so I was probably the last generation that actually had to use, tape for sound,
lenses,
physical film, and that's extremely expensive to buy raw film and then get it developed. And oh crap, there was a hair in the gate. Well, got to throw that out and buy another roll of film and start all over again.
Ouch.
And I've lost 2 weeks on this assignment. So I kind of hated that. I wonder if my life had been made easier by the proliferation of digital. One of these things I can carry in my pocket and shoot movies with, I might have a slightly different...
Yeah, so many movies are like on phones now, aren't they? They're like actual cinematic releases that have been like, oh, yeah, we made this all on an iPhone. Yeah.
And some good ones.
Smart, isn't it?
Yeah. I mean, how has digital... I mean, the comics industry itself has changed so much over. But, like, in terms of, like, your process and things you've learned and stuff, digital has affected comics in such a massive way. How have you noticed that?
Yeah. Well, what's interesting is, like, that was just starting just as I was breaking in the industry. So I, lettered in Quark, like my earliest comics. Yeah. And I remember I had a buddy who worked for Electric Crayon, which was one of the big comics coloring outfits in the 90s, in the mid 90s. Okay. And I went over to her offices, and, like, they shipped things out, like, in discs like this big. It was insane. I mean, you save a lot more in FedEx, I'll tell you that much. A lot more of, like, FedEx.
Less worry sometimes. Yeah.
Especially with comic art as well, I guess, isn't it? Because now the artists scan it all themselves, and then they can just email it.
You hear all these horror stories, don't you, of people losing stuff and it being stolen, and
Sure. Yeah, I mean, it's I think a challenge for a lot of guys because that was an important secondary market. I think it still is for a lot of people selling original art, and it's hard to, like, do that when you do it digitally. But I think most people, like, halfway through this book, I mentioned the great Tom Fowler, we're doing this book, Game Masters. About, like, 3/4 through the process, he switched over from physical to digital. I think he really enjoys it. But it was coloring. Computer coloring was still pretty much standard by the time I got involved in the business. Okay. So it's funny, the film took actually a little bit longer, but in comics, that digital stuff was already pretty much,
I guess there's an immediacy with film when you're recording, like you've got your product there, but with comics, it always seems like the industry's looking for a way of doing stuff faster and faster and faster to turn over.
Yeah. Well, I mean, when you're doing film, obviously, you still got to get the film developed.
But like with a comic, kind of like the process of kind of making a page seems a little bit longer than like saying film the scene. It's probably not. I'm just coming
you're
from a
talking
comics.
like the Instagram generation who just film something and stick it up, don't you? I guess, but
Sure.
yeah.
Yeah, and I mean, I think the coolest impact is just the ability to work with people all over the world. And you used to like, you no longer have to pay like outrageous shipping rates from Milan or wherever you live to get it to the publisher. In fact, you don't technically have to send it to the publisher at all. You're sending who sends it to the production.
I always think
don't have to pay an FTP site.
It's like a double-edged sword because you can do that transmitting the work and you can work anywhere, but also you're competing with everyone in the world to do these great comic books. Do you know what I mean? Because there's a guy in Argentina who can.
You don't have to move to New York, do you? Anymore?
Yeah, which is what we did. Ryan and Steve and one of our friends, we moved to New York to break in the comic industry, and it only took me 9 years. Haven't been able to get rid of me since.
That sort of that sort of long-term overnight success that people talk about. Yeah,
nice work. Because I know you're clearly a fan of old school. And I don't want to call them old school because I'm probably older than you, but you're a fan of that as well. Is that what were the influences for you to get into it? Because obviously you were reading comics as a child and as a teenager, I guess, as well, were you? Yeah,
like my parents got a lot of reprints. Like I got the Jules Pfeiffer book, Great Comic Book Heroes, which is the Golden Age stuff. But what I really love were the pocket books. This company did the early Marvels, like Hulk by Lee and Kirby, and Ditko and Lee Spider-Man, and all that stuff, and Doctor Strange, and these nice little colored paperbacks. I think that's really hooked me. I mean, I kind of like lost interest in comics, and really it was probably Grant Morrison that pulled me back in. Like he's my single biggest influence, because I might have dumped comics altogether when I was getting into college if it weren't for Doom Patrol.
Oh, really? Doom Patrol? Okay. Yeah.
It does take a toll on everyone.
Yeah.
Sorry?
And then Invisibles, I'm guessing?
Yeah, I didn't get into Invisibles as much. I loved his JLA run. Loved Seven Soldiers. Loved Multiversity. I loved The Filth, was probably my favorite original Vertigo book that Grant did. And just very cool guy.
Yeah, I can remember kind of stepping out of comics when you do the whole university thing and then jumping back into like Authority, and that kind of was like the resus paddles on my chest to get me back into large amounts of money on comics again.
Yeah, there we go. Think of the mansions we'd live in if it wasn't for those years.
It's that thing about drugs and comics, isn't it? Don't make sure your kid doesn't get into drugs by getting them into comics. They have no money.
Or fucking Lego. That's the other one, isn't
it? Yeah.
Well, it's money they could have been spending on drugs. So
exactly. You have a much better time than Lego if you just take a lot of heroin. That's a good message to come away with, actually, Fred.
That's not endorsed by the ACP.
It sounds like we're saying is prioritize drugs or comics or Legos. Just pick one, because you're going to be broke at the end of it regardless.
Exactly.
Yeah. Pick the right one. Pick comics.
Pick the one that works best for you.
Yeah. But obviously, like, you've jumped into comics, like I say, worked for years in it, but also in different sort of genres of fiction,
companies,
types of books, companies. You've worked with so many collaborators, and I know you're very much about the collaborative process and working with artists and stuff, which is something that we've talked about quite a few times on this show. What's your experience been like? Because you've just had Eat Fighter just like funded and stuff. Now that was like a webtoon. Was that a webtoon? That was a webtoon.
And it was the first comic I co-wrote with my wife, Crystal Skillman, who's mostly a playwright, but this is like her.
So
one of her inaugural comics ventures.
Okay, there's another question there. So is it your first webcomic you worked on?
I mean, it was my first webtoon. I did a bunch of webcomics for Marvel.
Did they have a same sort of a normal sort of format? But does webtoon have something slightly different?
That's the first and only time I've worked in the vertical scrolling webtoon format, which I like quite a bit.
Yeah. Interesting you're saying about Kickstarter there, Vig, because you were like a really early adopter of Kickstarter with your play, weren't you?
Yeah,
That was in the
King
kind of
Kirby
early days of
started.
Kickstarter.
Yes, our two biggest pledgers were Robert Kirkman and my dad. So it was an interesting situation. And I
Because your
co-wrote
dad
that
got big pockets, anything.
That's right. And I co-wrote that play with Crystal.
Yeah.
That's
nice.
playwright. That was our earliest sort of.
Did you want to talk a bit about what that was about, Fred? I find that really, I've listened to you talk to John Santos about it, but a lot of our listeners won't know what it is. Yeah.
Yeah, I mean, it's basically just a story of Jack Kirby and his sort of co-creation of the Marvel Universe and all this other stuff, and kind of talks about how he ended up where he ended up at the end of his life. Like a lot of comics creators did, in obscurity and not with the financial recompense that he really deserves. The difference between Kirby and everybody else, of course, is that he created more than anybody else. So it's sort of more of a tragedy. And he's just sort of a fascinating guy because he was born in the slums of Manhattan. He fought in France in World War II. He created, romance comics, which is where all you get all that Lichtenstein pop art stuff. He did this cosmic stuff and kind of fell in the hippie movement with Marvel and the Fourth World. So his whole life is kind of like, he was one of the first people to do independent comics when the direct market came out. So he's like the Zelig of like comics in America. Like his whole life is just this kind of amazing tapestry. And it was, it was really fascinating and really well received. It's still done all over the place. It's going to go up in Dallas next year.
Oh, really?
And and you're listening to this, and if you're interested, the original cast did a great podcast, actually, a production play, a pure audio play. That's just King Kirby. It's free. It's like 5 episodes. So just Google it. Search it in Spotify or Apple iTunes.
I'm going to do that.
Yeah, what's fascinating to me about that is like, you're taking a real man's life, and obviously you say like just an absolute titan, and I think in the modern world, when you talk about Kirby's legacy and stuff, I don't think people think enough about that legacy and the man behind it and stuff. People take it for granted that like, oh yeah, he did this and he did that, but when you're looking into like someone's life. How do you? And this could also work, listeners, for those of you out there who are maybe creating biographical comics of people. How do you choose what would make a good story point for a listener, or a viewer or a reader? A section of someone's life that would then appeal to an audience.
Remember, you've done it for the history of comic creators as well, haven't you?
Yeah, I mean, Kirby is sort of a weird situation because I was kind of bouncing around in my 20s, still trying to break in. So I started writing a biography. It's a lot of the research from that ended up both in the play and the comic book history of comics, the nonfiction comic. And I kind of adapted it. I just really sort of how dramatic it was. And I did a play, I think, largely because I was dating a playwright who would become my wife. I was like, well, if you can do it, But and I wasn't getting a whole lot of traction in comics or anywhere else for that matter. But yeah, and then it just ended up being something. A local theater ended up doing a comic book.
How'd you cast Kirby? That's a hard deal.
Yeah,
it was hard. Steve Rattazzi is a great actor. He's done a lot of Broadway. He's probably most familiar to your audience as he is Dr. Orpheus in the Venture Brothers. If there are any Venture Brothers fans out there, the cartoon.
I've not seen that one, but
it's fantastic, and he plays like the Doctor Strange analog. He's got a great kind of like Matt Berry kind of like
right
Orion voice when he wants to, But yeah, it was a challenge. We ended up almost like casting Danny DeVito's daughter, whose first name is eluding me, as Roz, Kirby's wife, but she ended up having to go do she did a sitcom that got picked up or something, so she had to go do that. And get your dad to maybe, dramatic acting.
So from that, how did you get your break into Marvel? I'm guessing Marvel. Do you consider Marvel to be your big break?
Yeah, I mean, it's what enabled me to do, do it full time. There's a book. You can see the poster on my wall over what is my left shoulder. You're right.
Yeah.
Of the Silencers, which was a crime comic that I did with Steve Ellis when I was at Syracuse, and it was about a superpowered team of mob enforcers who become freelance operators when the mafia family they work for gets whacked. And it got really good reviews. Nobody read it, but it got really good reviews. And
still available on Amazon, incidentally. I looked it up today.
Yeah.
There you go.
Yeah. And it's actually gone through a couple editions, so which is pretty awesome. That's the Comic Experience cover, the new cover Steve did.
Okay.
And then so I got picked up at Marvel, and the first thing I did for them was this revamp of the Scorpion, which was interesting.
This is the female version of the Scorpion, is that right?
Yeah. Yes. They had done I've told the story so many times. It's so bizarre. But basically, like, this was the early days of like Marvel.com they did an internet poll, and they were like, we're going to turn Matt Gargan into a teenage woman. And of course, what else do male comics fans want to hear?
How to make yourself popular in one easy
So like
step.
the pitchforks and the torches were like, but people, the book itself was really well received. The folks at Marvel liked it, and they kept me around for a while.
Cool. Yeah.
Nice.
And then is it then that you started working with Greg Pak? Was that around that time? Or?
Yes. And in fact, the Scorpion was the reason I did that, because their initial idea, so Greg was the Hulk writer, and they'd done this big event called World War Hulk, and they tried to spin off new titles off of these events, because it's smart sales. And they wanted to do this book called the Renegades at the time. It was Amadeus Cho, Angel, the female Scorpion, Namora, just a real like motley crew of characters who'd all supported Hulk during the World War Hulk. And so two of them were Hercules and Amadeus Cho. And someone at Marvel made the decision, and so they brought me on board because Greg was a little overworked, and I'd created the female Scorpion, so it seemed like a nice fit. So this character I was already familiar with. But they had decided that there were too many team books. They decided to do a book focused on Hercules and Amadeus Cho, which Tom Brevoort, the longtime editor, people were sort of skeptical whether that kind of a book would work. And he pointed to Valiant's Archer and Armstrong as sort of an example of the kind of book would work, which is hilarious because I'd never heard of Archer.
I've heard you talk, if you don't mind me intervening here, I've heard you talk about this. So that's almost like retrospectively you find out about the Archer and Armstrong thing.
Yeah, Tom
after
Brevoort
you get the gig.
Tom Brevoort told me that in the Marvel offices after Archer and Armstrong, my version had come out, which I thought found hilarious. Since obviously the only reason they hired me to Archer and Armstrong was because of Incredible Hercules. Yeah. So
I remember reading. That's a great run, man. If people can find it on the Marvel app or go and get the back issues or whatever, it's a great series. But I remember reading it because it was kind of the Champions, Backdoor Champions, wasn't it?
Yeah. I mean, Angel was one of the World War Hulk characters, and there was a lot of Champions. Champions was this short-lived team that was after the Defenders. Yeah, like with the Avengers, in the 70s, they clearly didn't think they'd end up theme books.
There's only like 20 issues, but it's a good run. Byrne worked on it. It's a solid.
It's got some fun stuff, and we used a lot of it in Hercules, and Black Widow was the leader, and I think it was Iceman. It was whatever super character was just like lying around. It's like Ghost Rider was in it. Yeah. Like if you were ineligible for Defenders membership, you wound up on the Champion somehow.
Yeah.
I think they were an LA super team. That was also like back in the 70s, 80s. For some reason, they put a lot of like stock in.
Yeah, I think they put Black Goliath in it at the end.
Pittsburgh,
Yeah.
The Justice League's in Detroit for some reason. Like,
so one of the reasons we sort of approach you is we've recently been getting the preview copies from Valiant. Now, I wanted to sort of rewind slightly because you were Valiant under Dinesh, weren't you?
Yep.
Back then. And am I right in saying from interviews I've read that you pitched Shadow Man a while before that, but they gave you the Anapada brothers?
Well, what happened I pitched Shadow Man, but in like 1996.
Oh, okay, right, okay. In the original, yeah.
Like the Jim Shooter, the Jim Shooter era. Like, because my roommate Steve Ellis, co-creator of the Silencers, actually succeeded Joe Quesada on Ninjak, so he was the second ever Ninjak.
Okay.
So he had
which they've just released. I know that Alien Books have just put that out, haven't they?
Yeah. Yep. And so they approached me at New York Comic Con about doing Archer and Armstrong, largely because of the on the strength of Incredible Hercules, and I was like, because it was Hunter who actually Hunter Goranson now actually runs Oni, was like, yeah, you want to do Archer and Armstrong for us? And I was like, sure, and then I went home and Googled what is Archer and Armstrong. And I was like, this Wikipedia page sounds like it was written by a maniac. Clearly, that's why they thought of me. But yeah,
it's like conspiracy theory central, isn't it? And I know you followed through the new era's got that as well.
If you're a fan, as I am, of Barry Windsor Smith and sort of followed his whole like arc from Conan to Weapon X, and then he was doing Rune at the Ultraverse, and he was one of the main creators of the Valiant universe. Archer Armstrong seems very personal to me, in that I don't understand it. his original comics are very like these religious people all want to kill this drunk immortal guy for some reason, and he ends up recruiting this Hare Krishna, and they go on adventures together. I kind of took that, and I was like, I said to Warren at the time, I said to his face, I don't understand this material, so I'm going to reinterpret it in a way that I understand it, and then maybe I can make other people understand it. Like I'm not a Hare Krishna, I don't know anything about Hare Krishnas, so I made Archer a conservative Christian because I was raised Christian. I can make fun of Christians. I know what they're like,
Yeah.
And then Armstrong. My original idea with Armstrong, which I think Barry was hinting at in the original series, and we kind of had to get rid of in the Valiant version, the 90s, or sorry, the 2012 version, because I think I would have been assassinated, which was that like all the religions want to kill Armstrong because he's immortal, and so he knows where all the bodies are buried, and he knows how many of their stories are bullshit, which is most of them. I was at the Sermon on the Mount. It did not go down like that. You know what I mean?
Yeah.
This Bible thing is a bunch of lies. And so they don't want to kill him because he's
kind of the Christopher Hitchens stroke superhero, isn't he? In a way.
Well, yeah. Christopher Hitchens was Christopher Hitchens with a time machine, right? Who could have gone back?
Yeah.
In the cave, where Muhammad was, and no, it didn't happen that way. This Moses part in the Red Sea. Sure. Sure. And so that was the joke originally, was that all these religions want to kill Armstrong, but then I ended up I'm not quite so like divorced from reality. I didn't know that would have kind of put a target on my back, and at some point someone at Valiant would have been like, nah, we're not doing this.
You'll be the Salman Rushdie of Valiant Comics.
Yeah, exactly. It's too offensive. But then it ended up being more like, I actually found it much more interesting and more fun to sort of take the piss out of conspiracy theories, Area 51, Jim Morrison. Each arc of that Archer and Armstrong run is them attacking another form of conspiracies. And then when we revamped, then we came back into the little one shot. I was amazed. Am I going to be able to find conspiracies we didn't do last time? And I immediately found one. And I was like, all right.
There's a few running around the internet at the moment, aren't there? Yeah. So you did Archer and Armstrong and Ivar back then, I think, didn't you? And then did you have a gap before you returned under the new sort of Alien books kind of?
Yes. I did a couple other books for them. I did a book called Psylords. I did a book called Mother. But I hadn't done anything for about 4 or 5 years until they approached me when the Resurgence event was starting, and I ended up taking over that book, which was super fun. It's fun doing those big old event books that are challenging, but they're also, when they come together really nicely, it's very exciting. And I just sent the last issue off. We sent it off on Monday, and it comes together really well, and I'm very excited for everyone to see it.
We're loving it, man. Absolutely loving it. Yeah.
What's it like, sort of collaborating on an event? I don't think this is something people think about. Like when you see these big, line-wide events, and it's never just usually one person, it's several people.
I talked earlier about my, problem I have is I don't care about offending people. So I'm going to use an analogy some people might find offensive.
You're on the right podcast, Fred. So don't worry about that, mate. Yeah.
So remember how there was supposed to be a fourth plane on 9/11 that was going to hit the Pentagon, second plane?
Yes.
But the passengers rebelled and took over seized the cockpit. That's how I feel about a large company line event, I am seizing control of the cockpit. There's all
the
these
Che
other
Guevara of Valiant.
I'm going to die probably, but I'm going to make the effort. Gosh darn it! And so so I ended up just kind of like rushing the cockpit and being like, I'm in charge now. Because there's a lot of like and I totally get it, because you're dealing with a new company, Alien, who's taking over the license, and creators, and a lot of times, the challenge is a lot of creators, these creators don't necessarily, the English isn't their first language, right? So there's a bit of a language barrier.
Yeah, a lot of the artists are Spanish and stuff, aren't they? Yeah.
Yeah, and so actually with Alien, that has not really been that big of a deal at all. But at a certain point, you have to be like, I am seizing control of the plane. Yeah. Because if I don't, it's just going to crash.
I think with all kinds of projects, you need someone to stand up and say, right, come on, guys.
Well, if you've got different
folks.
Books and different creative teams working on it, everyone's going to be like, well, I need to protect my one, I'm doing this. But there needs to be someone who'll be like, okay.
Yeah, look, let's be reasonable. You've got to do this. Don't forget to put this in there. This needs to happen. Yeah, there's a bit of that in there. Yeah, I'm guessing you don't get any extra money for that, Fred. It's just passion.
I won't discuss the particulars of my.
Yes.
But does that mean you have
like? You actually found something I'm not going to talk about.
Yes, finally.
First time ever. What is it? 60 minutes? Literally these softball questions. Discussions in that arena have been made.
We'll cut that bit. We'll cut that bit out and add a different answer. That's very 60 minutes, as I understand it.
Yeah. But like when
you leave it in, I don't care.
Yeah, when you step up to things like that, do you have to have a tough skin to do stuff like that? Because there has to be points where, like, if you are stepping up to take control of something that could quite easily get out of control, you've got to be able to say no to people. And obviously the comics community is certainly a community of people that there's a lot of people who don't like to say no.
But the thing is as well, I think, just to interrupt there quickly as part of that, if you don't mind, Fred, is that companies, the editors and the company are going to come in. Oh, Fred, do you know how you're going to do that with? Yeah, you can't do that. He's not going to be it anymore. It's almost that sort of IP-driven company as well. It's going to come from both sides.
Sure, and the thing is that I think a lot of the editorial input comes in at the very beginning, and so you do have marching orders to a certain extent. It's not like you're given free reign, but I think beyond that,
so they sort of let you know, when this finished, this is the status quo we need it to be at. Get us there.
I will answer that question in an analogy to a previous work we mentioned, which is so Jack Kirby could, at the height of his powers in the 60s, was drawing 9 pages a day, and most artists either like their head explodes when they hear that. And the only reason you're able to draw 9 pages a day, and this is something we dramatize in the play, is Kirby, and we likened it to a street fight, right? Which is happens very quickly. So you're going to make decisions very, very quickly, right? And so the only way you can do that, you can't sit there and sort of agonize over every line, right? And so he had this innate ability, and you'll talk to anybody who knows what he's talking about in cartooning, that people who don't know what they're talking about mock Kirby for his anatomy, but his distended anatomy and his perspective kind of go hand in hand, right? So you can have these bodies flying in space and throwing punches and flame bolts or whatever have you, And so what comes down to it is the old cliche of that no action is worse than bad action. You just kind of have to take the reins and say, we're doing this. Yeah, this is what we're doing. Because particularly in monthly comics, I often work with people who come from movies and TV, or God help us, book publishing, where the timeline is much more extended. And a lot of times it just grinds them down too quickly. And it grinds down a lot of artists too, for the same reason. But because you have these time constraints, you just have to make decisions quickly and hope they're the right ones, and hopefully you've done it long enough and your instincts are correct and your experience guides those instincts towards the right decision, that you know what you're doing. If not, it's a disaster and the plane's crashing.
We had a couple of other people mention that might factor into that writer's block. Say you kind of like you've got to be delivering a script at X time, and you're totally jammed up, you can't move forward. Do you have any? Have you ever had problems with that, or how do you get around it?
Not really. I mean, to the point where I don't even. I'm actually an agnostic whether or not writer's block actually exists.
I agree.
I mean,
Yeah.
Like there's that cliche that you've seen a bunch of stories and movies about that writer who wrote the one successful book and how he's paralyzed and he can't write the second book. I have no sympathy for those people.
Yeah.
Get them off my movie.
Yeah, start typing, mate. That's what I say.
Exactly.
Yeah,
exactly.
Yeah.
Well, I mean, basically, Hemingway said that all first drafts are shit, and that kind of really what comes down to me. The way I interpret that is that writing is a very unique act in that it's one of those things where it's not until you finish it and go back and look at what you've done that you can understand what it is. And now you can actually make it what it is, that it isn't from chapter one once you're at the last chapter. Another, unpleasant analogy I like to use, it's like, to me, it's the opposite of a car crash. You come in a car crash, there's twisted metal, there's blood, there's body parts, there's smoke everywhere. You have to take the body parts and the blood and the carburetor and the fender and the windshield pieces and put them all back together into a happy family singing in the car. Okay. But you're always starting with a disaster.
Okay.
Yeah.
And so what I always tell students is the best cure for writer's block is give yourself the freedom to suck. Don't let yourself be paralyzed by the fear of being bad, because just so you know, you're going to be bad. It's going to be bad.
Yeah.
It's all right, but it's okay. That's part of the process, right? And
I always think of it a bit like people going about the problem of second albums. And I always feel like saying, were those 8 songs all you ever had? People going about these great bands who have an album out and then they have a problem getting it. I said, was that all you ever had, those first 8 songs?
Yeah.
Because there's definitely more. Just get on with it.
Yeah. I think also like if you think something's bad, even when you think something is like, that's the best work I've ever done, you put it out, someone's not going to like it. So bad is such a relative term, because there are some people that will eat it. Some people will eat it up, and some people are just like, well, I just don't like that.
Yeah, I mean, we quote this quite a lot. Even Dave Gibbons has got problems with his art in Watchmen. It's never going to be perfect anyway, whatever you do. Sorry,
that one panel.
Yeah.
Well, I mean, and let's be honest, when we're talking about, I should say when most people are talking about bad, right? What we're talking about is being made fun of, right? Of being criticized by others. Like we're afraid of the consequences of badness, not the actual badness itself.
Yeah, that's true.
Which is again why I tell people the only person judging you right now is you, right? That's why you have to rewrite it before anyone sees it. Fit for human consumption is only.
Yeah, be honest to yourself. I think sometimes it's the most important thing. I think people who think it's terrible. You get the different kinds of people. People will look at it and think this is fucking terrible, or people who will look at it and think this is amazing. I don't need to change anything. Yeah. It's they're as bad as each other. I think sometimes.
Yeah. The difference between a professional and an amateur is an amateur always thinks they're good.
I love that. Yeah.
So
tonight.
The process of the writing, like you've got to kind of complete something to go back to be able to refine it. If you're constantly stopping yourself from getting to the end and going back, it's always going to be bad because it's not done.
Which is something I wish I could have told myself in my 20s and sort of been like, you should finish something. Dude. Yeah. But I never would have listened, and I don't think anyone listened.
No, that's the problem with the age thing, isn't it?
Yeah. Did you have the learnings of like, as a lot of like creators do, I've got an issue for a 20, 30, 40 issue series that's going to be amazing, and then reality kind of crumbles.
We see that a lot in small press here. Yeah.
In indie comics, that must be a big thing as well. Like if you plan an epic, it's so difficult to get 10 issues.
Especially at the moment. What series runs 10 issues anymore? Sadly, not very few.
Yeah, I mean, my first thing was a 12-issue science fiction thing that I did with Steve called Tranquility that we only got 4 issues out, and that was only 12. I was doing the Watchmen model, right? My 12 chapters all laid out. But and I have to tell, I taught a student recently who had like a 400-page issue thing, and I was like, dude, and he's like, he literally wanted to tell the story of this character from like birth to his old age, death, like 200, this sort of Viking Conan type. And I was like, dude, we don't, you've heard this a lot. We don't need to hear his life story.
Yeah. And then there are some cartoonists that do something like that in one page. Do you know what I mean? That have that sort of like,
I don't think we even get told the story of Conan's childhood. every single adventure is him adventuring.
The good thing about
It's not like-
Conan, it jumps about in periods of
Yeah,
his
yeah,
life,
yeah.
doesn't it? So that's you can do that. It's just you don't need it. It's like a really boring autobiography that spends the first 100 pages on his school life. I'm not interested in that. I'm sorry. But
Speaking of Conan, we don't need Conan Jr.
No. Oh god. Yeah.
Don't put that idea out into the ether.
No. Now,
That's Fred's next pitch.
Yeah. Speaking of school life,
Aiden doesn't listen to this podcast.
you mentioned school life, and Fred, you've mentioned students a couple of times. So now it takes a certain person. It takes one person to make comics. God bless all of you out there who are making comics, and to just have a career out of that full time. And another type of person to also do that, and not just want to pass knowledge on to the next people, but actually teach them, which you've done like several different ways. Like you've got several different courses. Do you want to tell us a little bit about that and how that started?
Sure. My buddy Andy Schmidt, who was an editor at Marvel, although weirdly we never worked together when we were both at Marvel at the same time. He has a company called Comics Experience that has done live face-to-face teaching, both classes and one-on-one mentoring for a long time. And we became pals at a con we both attended in Vegas, of all places. And he invited me to come on board. And so I started teaching a bunch of specialized courses for him. Some of them where he teaches the entry-level writing stuff, and I teach him more specific things. And he's branched out a bit into, so he offers that service and also one-on-one mentoring, which is just, me talking with people on Zoom the way we are now, except it would just be one-on-one. And then a company called Domestica, which is based out of Madrid, they hired me to do an intro to a comics writing course, which was very cool. And we shot that in their studio, the studio here in Manhattan. And that was super awesome. So over 6,000 people have taken that course, which is very gratifying. And then we're going to start again with Comic Experience, the one-on-one teaching in 2025. So I'm very much looking forward to that.
What's that? Other than the one you've just mentioned there about, don't write a 400-page book, are there any sort of common mistakes that you're seeing coming up, especially in the one-to-one teaching, I'm thinking? Is there something that's quite common at the moment?
I don't know how of the moment it is. It's stuff that, is, I think, plagues beginning writers in any medium at any point. Like the biggest Achilles heel for a lot of storytellers is not knowing where to start.
Okay.
There's a lot of and I guess I'm just thinking of my, I was hired by the UAE government to teach some of their folks, and so it was interesting, and so it was weird because it was because of the distance we didn't do cameras weren't on, so we were talking to each other in spectral voices, which is sort of a weird way to teach, but it turned out okay. But yeah, that was I gotta tell the childhood and all this stuff. But he explicitly said, "Well, you need to understand all this stuff so you'll understand what comes later." I'm like, no, you don't.
Right?
You really don't. And so there's a lot of that. There's a lot of too much backstory. It doesn't matter. If you want your story to be about your hero trying to kill Odin, then we do not need the 15 issues leading up to why is this vendetta against Odin. Just start it there, and we'll fill in the gaps as you go along. And then the second thing that is super common is the plague is people sitting around a room talking. That's bad TV writing, right?
Especially if it's a first issue. If there's a just giant, bloated ticks, word balloons filled with verbiage.
And is there any chance, Fred, you can just walk over to the Marvel offices and point out?
I won't name the title, but I read a book earlier the year, and it was about a prison camp kind of thing, like a super prison camp, and the inmates told the new recruit what would happen if they tried to escape. This will happen and this will happen. It's just show someone escaping and that happening to them.
Exactly.
Right. It's more interesting to see the guy getting shot off the walls than someone saying a guy tried to escape and he got shot off the walls. It's like
What? So it was just dialogue, and
there were
Talking heads.
three or four
Yeah.
people sitting down having a drink, and they were saying,
Yeah, it's almost like newbies feel like they have to tell you the story the way they're like I, the author, am telling you the story.
Oh, interesting. Yeah.
Characters
Yeah.
end up doing it, you know. Yeah, so there's way too much of like. No, you need to know, you know, like I think, you know, a lot of it is, I think people are a lot of reasons people are drawn to superheroes and anime and Game of Thrones and God know what else is the lore, right? So it's like they want to like the problem is most of us started as fans. I know I did, and a lot of us want that to replicate that fan impulse in other people. The problem is that you're never going to inspire someone as a reader the way you were inspired as a reader if you're the author. And that can be a tough pill to swallow for a lot of people. That it's like, you know, it's almost like a quantum superposition. You know, it's like I'm the observer, but it's the difference between the observer and the actor, right? The actor is never going to think like the observer. So because I know what happens, you know. I got all my books. I have all these books in my living room that I wrote, like, you know, the wall of, my friend calls it the wall of ego. I'm like, what the wall of facts, dude. And the guy goes, you know, I always love that reaction if somebody walks your house and they go, "You've read all those books?" Like, oh my God, I'm like, well, those no, because I wrote them. So I don't, you know, like, it's like smelling your own farts, you know. It's like, you know, they smell better than yours, but still, it's unpleasant.
Well, that's interesting because you talk about comics writing, but you're also writing prose as well.
Yeah.
So you've written a Bloodshot book. I'm going to say.
Yes, my Bloodshot novel comes out on January 21st. So mark your calendars.
Is that in continuity, or is that slightly off story, or?
It is my own continuity. Which means,
what is your history with Bloodshot?
I don't have one. He crossed over with Archer and Armstrong, but this publisher that got the rights to do the Valiant comics, Blackstone, which is out of Oregon, published my last novel, which was a historical spy thriller called Never Sleep. And so I just happened to read it. My agent reached out to them, and so they gave me Bloodshot. Originally, we were going to do Archer and Armstrong, but poor Archer and Armstrong, they're never the prettiest girl at the dance.
Is that coming? Do you think if this Bloodshot one does well? Do you think you'll do that one?
Maybe. I'm very excited with what Bloodshot sets up. So I actually be more interested in writing more Bloodshot.
Okay, interesting.
You know,
yeah.
I mean, that's got 80s pulp novel. It's like The Destroyer. It's like Mac
The
Bolan, The
Executioner,
Executioner. It's got all that written over it. It should be a novel series as well, I think.
Yeah.
It's so good. Such a great character. That whole playing into the PTSD element as well is a really interesting factor with him.
He's the love child of Wolverine and Punisher.
Yeah. He's not so much of a ladies' man, is he? Bloodshot.
No. He meets a girl in the first page of our book, and that's the love interest. It's like a baby bird. He gets imprinted.
Even Frank Castle met some girls and ladies
because he wakes up in the middle of the woods with no memory, and so the person he finds ends up being the person that he's, you know, feels the most emotionally connected to, because she's literally the first person he's ever met.
Yeah.
So I'm looking forward to that, man. Yeah.
It came out really good. It's very exciting.
How do you balance? I mean, prose is a completely different sort of mindset as well. It can be.
Yeah.
How do you balance like writing comics and writing prose? Do you have to like? Because you are very busy, as well as like the teaching and the comics and the prose and the web comics. Basically, are you getting enough sleep?
I'm sure what drives my wife crazy. I am gifted for whatever reason of really good time management. Some people might call it anality, but I call it efficient time management. So I spend a lot of time playing video games. Don't worry about me. 8 hours every night sleep.
Yes.
Nice.
You can't beat time management, man. Like self-discipline to stick to it. You really can't.
Yeah.
I have actually. I don't think I've ever done this before, and this will not mean a whole lot to people, obviously, who are listening on the podcast, because we're doing this over video. So, like, here's what I do. So, this is December, right?
Right.
Yeah.
All right.
This is these. So I keep track of what I'm doing every day, and you see there's two different colors there. the one on top is morning project, and then the second color is post lunch project.
Okay.
Nice.
And so I go through every year. It's one of my December's. Let's go back to January.
He's holding up a calendar for listeners. He's holding up
an elaborate Planet Comics calendar.
Yeah.
Different. It's the classic kind of. And so it's like a different projects. You see A&A obviously is Archer and Armstrong.
Yeah.
Some of this stuff, actually most of this stuff has already been published.
Does that help you then, having like morning I'm doing this, after lunch I'm doing this, rather than do the whole thing all day?
Yeah. And then because I do minimum 4 pages a day, I can actually, when I get an assignment, I can go boom, 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 boom.
Right.
This is
okay.
It's done. I do 4 pages a day. For some days, 4 pages takes me 40 minutes, and it's off to the Xbox. Some days, 4 pages take all freaking day, and no Xbox for Fred. Fred is sad.
Okay. I suppose with a guy who's like you, sort of hustling across a couple of companies, you've also got to factor in emails, Zoom calls, editorial. Yeah, us. Pain in the asses like us. Yeah, I agree, man. Yeah.
You're lovely.
There's the Paul quote. Right.
Yeah, there you go. I fucking rabbit on about Amos a lot, but I saw a quote from Amos the other day that said, I write about 100 pages a year. I thought, fucking hell, you got it easy. What are you talking about? 100 pages.
I was lucky enough to at Syracuse, actually, Douglas Adams came to speak a few years before he died, and I was stunned at just how much he hated writing, the actual physical act of writing. It was just like agony. So it does not strike me if he's one of those. If he was one of those.
What's that quote? I love the sound of a deadline as it swooshes past me. You know, it's like you used to have 3 baths a day to avoid writing. Sometimes I like that. Yeah.
But I mean, I'm guessing because you've got like the morning and the afternoon sessions, and very importantly is you've got the lunch break in the middle.
Lunch.
Yeah. I mean,
or a meal a day.
Oh yeah, totally. And you don't want to have it to be too big or too heavy, because then you'll feel a bit sleepy when you try and do the afternoon shift.
Yeah.
But does
I always make you? The key is you always have to make sure the project that is in the best shape is the afternoon project.
Oh, okay.
The one that needs the least attention from you.
Yeah.
Afternoon.
After a couple of tequilas over lunch.
Yeah. Overindulged with the chicken parm.
Yeah. So that project could be something that was a morning project, like the week previous, but is now moved up.
Yeah, exactly. The first day on a project, always in the morning.
Yeah. Do you find that you'll get an urgent job come in? We were chatting to Pat Mills about this, and I said to him, I read your ABC Warriors novel years ago, and he says, yes, that came in late, and I wrote it in a weekend. Do you get that, where you get like an urgent project, and you think, oh, fuck, now this really messes with my timetable. I have to get the highlighters out.
I mean, the early parts of Resurgence I wrote really quickly because I had to be on-ramped onto that because I was replacing somebody who had to leave. I got on-ramped on that. I did a comic called Eminem versus the Punisher that had an insane schedule, but fortunately Eminem and his manager knew way more about the
Punisher. Better have won that, Fred. I'm telling you now. The Punisher better have won that.
Fans were not happy with me. It was very much a female Scorpion situation.
Ended in a rap battle.
Oh,
I don't know everything.
I was lucky that Eminem and his manager have an encyclopedic knowledge of Garth Ennis's Punisher.
He's a big comics fan, isn't he? I saw recently a video of him from a few years ago where he was at Jonathan Ross's house, and Jonathan Ross gave him a copy of Avengers 4. I'm like, fucking hell, I must go around Jonathan Ross's house. Yeah.
I mean, if he's handing out,
yeah.
I can imagine.
In fact, let's plan a heist.
Eminem spitting bars about Frank's family going for a picnic.
Yeah, and his favorite artist is John Romita Sr., believe it or not.
Oh, he's got a taste then.
Famously designed the Punisher.
Yeah. Oh, nice.
The
other thing I see that you do, Fred, is you spread yourself in the nicest possible way across the indie world and the sort of, let's call it the sort of more mainstream world. When we met, I was on a table across from you at Nobrow at TCAF.
Okay.
A great show, but it's much more the indie. I think hipster's an outdated term now, but it's that crew, isn't it?
Sure.
Do you find you have to change, or do you find your work applies, or how do you find you deal with? And then I also met you and Ryan at New York once, so I think you spread yourselves across 3 lots of, you know.
It's interesting because the superhero comics have become more and more kind of even more specialized. I mean, I think most young people, particularly here in the States, I don't know if that's the situation in the UK at all, but like kids here read manga. You know, like they're
totally
very much alienated from the whole Marvel DC of it all. I find me and Ryan's our nonfiction stuff, like Philosophers, tends to sell better, period, no matter where we go, than a lot of the mainstream superhero stuff. So it's like Valiant and Marvel and all those folks have their fans, and if they scan the guest list at the con, they know you're there. They show up with their long boxes, or they're looking to just say hi or whatever it is. But for the casual reader, somebody walking by at TCAF, for those of you who know, TCAF is this great, it's a great show in Toronto. It was in the main Toronto library, but I think they're doing renovations to it. So they've got
I didn't know that. Right.
And so it's free because, of course, Canada, has to subsidize its comic book conventions. Thanks for nothing, Canada, for making us look bad as usual. We can't compete with that over here in the States. But it's a fantastic show, and it's great, and it's it's like the library is open, right? So it's the usual patrons and several very confused homeless people who are wandering.
Oh man, I've got to tell you, we had
no idea what's going on.
We were quite near the entrance, and we had a couple of incidents with homeless people trying to just grab books and walk off with them. And then I went for a wander, and I wanted to go and eat a sandwich, so I went and sat upstairs, and they have like the typical sort of library internet area where, let's say, weird people can come and look at the internet in the library. And some bloke was like literally just looking at like super far right stuff, like where everyone could see, like going through, like, oh, okay, fair enough. I'm sitting there eating a sandwich, watching him look at
the public library. You're going to meet the public there.
Yeah. I'm sure there's a lot of creators out there. In fact, the first time I ever met Tony Esmond was
it was in a library.
It was in a library.
Yeah,
you meet the weirdest people.
You do. Look what's happened. Now we're married.
Oh dear. But I think like straddling like the mainstream and the independent is fascinating. But what you said there about like the manga, because we've totally experienced that. Like bookshops are now, the graphic novel section's getting slightly smaller because the manga section's getting.
Oh man, we're down to one comic shop in London now.
Yeah.
That's all
and
we've got.
There's something you said earlier, Fred, that got me thinking. Like when you were getting into comics, there was the pocket book printed versions, the smaller books that you could just take anywhere.
Right.
And like Tokyo Pop, all of these manga tomes, they're little pocket books, aren't they? That people can just take anywhere. Yeah. Do you think that's almost something that makes it more accessible to the new generation? Because
someone like Archer and Armstrong would be ideal for that, I think.
We don't see many smaller versions of like.
DC have kind of gone for that a little bit, almost like half-hearted action towards it, haven't they? Where it's slightly smaller, they're releasing these volumes.
Yeah, but I think sometimes if it's a normal comic page and you shrink it down, it doesn't work. I think there's something about the way that manga's designed.
Especially in my old eyes. Yeah.
Well, I don't think that. I think that's part of it. I honestly think it's primarily probably the art style would be my impulse. And it's
also
not even
backed up by animes. There's the animated cartoon.
And also backed up by anime. Like it all gets traced down to Tezuka, right? Osamu Tezuka, and he got it from Disney, right? So it's there's a direct line to be drawn from Bambi to Akira, as crazy as that sounds. And we'd explore that in the comic book history of animation. So,
very good. Nice work.
And I think that it's it also has a lot to do with the fact that the American industry the American industry dominated the English language comics industry, and then that got dominated by superheroes for a variety of reasons, and it became almost synonymous with superheroes, the comics medium in the English speaking world. Which is,
do you think without Wortham we'd be an entirely different industry, wouldn't we? I guess.
Well, yeah. I mean, to a certain extent, yeah. I mean, because continental Europe and Japan didn't have the same purges as Wortham did. And obviously, not obviously, I don't know how common knowledge this is. The UK had their own anti-comics crusade, although that was a bit different because that was also partly an anti-American thing.
Well, our anti-comics thing came in the 80s, around the time we had the Video Nasty stuff going on as
Yeah.
well. He was a little bit more sort of against counterculture than perhaps mainstream, I think.
Well, and what's interesting, what I find interesting is unlike in the U.S. Congress ended up kind of ignoring Worth, and like they had those famous hearings, but then nothing came of it. The Parliament actually passed an anti-comics law in like 55, I want to say it was, but then only one person's ever been charged under it, and they had to pay like £50, like a £50 fine for printing Tales from the Crypt. It was the same publisher of Marvel Man, actually. It was, I'm trying to remember.
Okay.
I think it's L. Miller. Is that ringing any bell?
Right. Okay. Interesting.
Publisher.
Like
anyway,
yeah. We've had a continued series of dramas. I mean, we had the Rupert the Bear stuff, and we had the Lord Horror stuff, and we've had a lot going on. There's a couple of sort of it's unusual for the UK because it sounds more American, but sort of super Christian people who've decided that the comics are wrong.
They're everywhere.
Yeah.
I mean, we're talking a lot about like comics history and stuff, which is massively fascinating. But how important for you? I mean, you're someone who's very interested in comics history and its relationship with animation and so many other different things. How important do you think it is for readers of comics to be aware of history and what came before? Do you know what I mean? What would you say to them?
I think that I almost see history as a genre, like science fiction or anything else. I think it's important to know history. I think part of it is, part of the problem is just as human beings. So like 1984 is a perfect example of this. It was people, you weaponize history and they use it to form their own ideological ends, as opposed to doing what I think historians should do, which is tell what happened. Let people wake up. Problem is everybody's scared to do that because they're afraid you might come up with a conclusion I don't want you to have. So
it's that Norm Macdonald thing, isn't it? He said it's funny that all history is written by the good guys.
Yeah. Well, serious.
Did Dan set your computer off? He does that.
But no, I mean, also, other thing people complain about, I mean, none of you guys have brought this up, but I hear that, and you don't really hear this that much anymore, but people complain, continuity's too confusing, superhero continuity's too confusing. And I always like it. Try to pick up One Piece volume 100. Love it. Yeah. Like no one, like that's, to me, that's the special sauce. Like the continuity is what makes
we find it frustrating, or I personally say, when people get to come on the title and then they seem to have no interest in writing about the character, and they interject their own like self-insert because they don't want to focus on whatever the main superhero is. That's like, why'd you come and why did you take this gig?
It's interesting when you put a character like, for example, Daredevil's one that springs to mind, through so much trauma, it kind of has to play out in the future when other things happen to him. I think so.
Which character?
Daredevil, I was going to say as an example.
For sure.
Yeah. But I think there's the whole changing the character to suit your new writing. I think it has a problem. People write themselves. That's the whole story in it. People write themselves rather than the character.
And I mean, partly that's why, I think they wanted me to do all this Valiant stuff, is because I know the continuity pretty well. Most because I ended up writing this book, Archer and Armstrong, where a lot of the continuity comes from, So that's been very helpful, just so people know that someone who cares about the characters is shepherding, not that other people didn't care about, but for a lot of people, it's just a job, and they only want to, there's only so much time in the day, and there's only so quickly I can onboard myself onto the series. Better to get somebody who already knows it.
And you really are bringing it. We got Divinity, we got Exo appearing. The Eternal Warrior one shot is just so brilliant. Loved it.
That was a lot of fun. We just sent off the Bloodshot one. I'm pretty happy with that one too.
Oh, ace.
I mean, a lot of these you can see in Tony's face there. I mean, you're singing the songs that he wants to hear.
We got very excited. We get through the preview copies, and they usually come in at quite late at night, and I immediately WhatsApp these guys. I'm
like, what's going on?
Are you staying with it post resurgence, Fred?
Oh yeah. In fact, I'm relaunching one of the big titles that I'm very, very, very excited about. Very excited.
It's EXO then, yeah.
I cannot say.
Two things he cannot say. We got him.
Yeah. That one is more. I don't want to ruin the surprise for you guys.
Yeah. Oh, okay.
Yeah,
Excellent.
With Valiant in particular, and when we could talk for days, we're going to have to let you go shortly. But with Valiant in particular, obviously you went from Marvel and then to Valiant. Was it your experience with Valiant and that universe that's made you such a big fan and creator of it? You know.
Oh yeah, I mean I didn't read any of those books in the early 90s. I was in college and focusing on trying to get laid. So I like the early Image days and the early Valiant days and all that stuff. I was literally only reading Grant Morrison's Doom Patrol.
That's the one you could read in front of a lady. That's the thing.
I was probably also broke. That did not hurt. No, it's a really fun universe, and just so many of the concepts are so awesome, and it's been so cool to play with so many of them, particularly in both the Bloodshot novel and in Resurgence and in All New.
Good. Yeah. Man,
you'll find out.
I am so excited. I say this every time we have someone who's connected to Valiant. I am so excited because I thought you'd gone away. I thought we got to the point where Valiant had almost closed up, and then this has happened, and we're getting like
because we had that boom pit. Because I didn't really read Valiant until there was the London Super Comic Con. Do you remember that, guys?
They did that deal.
Baseball caps and stuff, didn't we?
Yeah, I remember that because I've got the Tony. I think you gifted me the EXO collection that's got like the yellow masthead.
Yeah.
That was when I was in it, and just like. I think one of the thing about Valiant is someone's always going to discover those characters at some point. They've had different stages, and there's always like, I was like, holy shit, I didn't know there was something.
And Alien are doing the right thing because they're going back and producing like the Ninjak book and the EXO. Yes. They're doing like an EXO art book, I think, coming out and this sort of thing. So they're paying reverence to the earlier stuff. It should. I have to say, I think Dinesh killed on it, man. I met him at Heroes a couple of years. Met him at Heroes a couple of years ago, and he's a massive fan as well, isn't he? And I said to him, can you please go back to Valiant? Nice to meet you. My name's Tony. Can you go back to Valiant, please? And he just, I wish I could. And it's nice to see that someone's got a grip of it now again. Yeah. I think, is it Sally Hawkins? Lisa Hawkins, isn't it? Lisa Hawkins. She's killing it, man, because she's across all the titles, isn't she? I think she's the editor for them.
Yeah, she's great.
Yeah, really pleased.
Amazing. So you've got an awful lot of stuff coming out, including that book. Which we won't.
That's in March or April. They keep moving the date. I'm not sure.
Okay. So for anyone who wants to figure out more, you're our last guest of 2024 as well.
Yeah.
So as a Christmas present, we've got a guest that there's so much stuff you can go forth and sign up for courses and buy books and everything. So for people that want to follow you, give them Fred Van Lente.
Right.
But totally. And where can people find you and everything that you're working on what's coming up?
Well, if you can spell my name, it's just Fred Van Lente. That's me on X and Blue Sky and Facebook and Instagram. Coming out now, I have a fun, gory horror title called Murder Kingdom that's about a serial killer in Disney World.
I've read the first two issues of that.
Yeah, they're doing a fantastic job over there. And all my Valiant stuff, Resurgence is ongoing. The new titles start. I guess I should say new titles. That's true. I'm doing two big books for Valiant.
Right.
In 2025.
Any news on when they're trading them up, Fred? Are they coming out in trades? We've got dates for them.
We just talked about this the other day. Soon.
Right. Cool.
I don't know.
Cool. Yeah.
But I'm sure I'm thinking. And you can check out King Kirby. Free podcast written by me and Crystal Skillman.
And you've got your competitive eating book coming out as well, haven't you?
And that's right. And Eat Fighter will be out in stores, I think, probably late next year. The book's done. We just started
it.
And Comics Experience and just...
That's right. Game Masters, the Complex History of Role-Playing Games will be out in April, probably, hopefully.
Oh, nice.
What was the first role-playing game, like tabletop role-playing game?
The first one I loved was Top Secret, which was TSR's Spies one. That was from 1980. I mean, I started it on D&D like everybody else, but my group loves Call of Cthulhu. What I love right now, that the games I'm really getting into, is an outfit out of London actually called Modifius. They have a great system called the 20 system. We did their John Carter and their
Oh,
Dishonored.
okay. Well, you
And
wrote John Carter in Dynamite, didn't you, as well?
I did, yeah. That's actually
Yeah.
kind of what I was like. Oh, Modifius makes this too, because I love their Dishonored game.
Yeah. Did they do Star Trek? I've got it on my.
Yeah, they do Star Trek.
Yeah.
I've got the lower
Us Toothers over here were big fans of the Judge Dredd game that came out. I'm going to say late 70s, early 80s, with the Bolan cover. That's a great game.
Yeah.
They had that at the
Lawless.
what do you call it?
convention.
Lawless,
there was
yeah.
an
Oh, they've
old
re-released it,
dust-
haven't they?
No, there was an old dusty box of a
Oh, it was an
first
old one.
That
Oh, yeah.
probably had loads of bits missing, as you normally find with old games. But there's so much. Fred, thank you for coming on the show.
Brilliant,
You're
mate.
so prolific. Give us 2 weeks, and we'll have you
Yeah.
back on to
Have
talk
another
about
load of
the other
books.
20 projects.
whole
you're
new
working on.
round of stuff to talk about. Exactly.
No, thank you, and go follow him, folks, because there's loads
Yes,
of comics to
do.
discover.
Thanks, guys.
And there we have it. Another,
Yes.
like one hell of a creator, prolific creator,
Anthony got quite excited.
and like someone that just loves making comics.
And he still didn't tell us who that character was.
No.
No.
Sometimes they linger after the show and give us a few tidbits. We've never divulged.
To any creators out there who do have like secret work they can't let anyone.
We've
know
never
about,
told anyone, have we?
We have
No.
never
Yeah.
told anyone, and just let you know you're safe here. This is there's a safe bubble.
Yeah.
But
I scratched it. Actually, wanted to tell someone. I tell my wife, and she just shrugs.
Yeah.
just the look of disdain on your face. You're like, she doesn't care.
We may have had the funniest. We may have just had the funniest conversation about name badges as well, which did make me laugh.
Yep. Which is a wonderful
Nick's that
segue.
idea.
Which is a wonderful segue to this week's shout-outs. Do we have any shout-outs this week, James?
I've got a few. They're not. Firstly, I'm going to give a shout out to all of our brothers in Podland who also do podcasts, and we've been on a number of them. So big shout out to Eamon, Mega City Book Club. We've all been on that. That's a great podcast. Big shout out to David and Peter at the Earth 2 podcast. We have been voice actors on that show. I'm going to tell you now. Jason and the boys at the EOC, I've been over there, and That Comic Smell as well. Nando, Mike, Tom, and Dave. All of them equally supportive of each other, and it's great to see.
They're all legends.
Yeah, really good guys. In other podcast news, myself and Al Henderson, had a very Christmassy time talking about Santa in comics over at the Never On Anything.
Okay.
And a final one, which is all about me again. It's all about me this week. I've just finished. I'm just literally got it open in front of me. I'm just finishing some dialogue tweaks on Tony Osmond 2, but it's all drawn.
That is fucking great.
Yeah, a couple of things to do. Cliff is bang at work on that, and it'll be going over to Ken. It's all right, I've warned Ken. He'll probably hear this and go, hang on. No, I told you about 6 months ago, Ken. I'll be going over to Ken to do some lettering on it. So it's the best thing you'll see from Cliff. And Cliff's great. But there's some of the pages in this fucking blew me away.
Can't wait.
Amazing.
Cannot wait.
Really good.
Amazing.
Yeah. That's mine.
Dan, what have you got?
Well, I'm going to give a shout out to the 500. The Marquis de Cornwallis, the bad guy in the Mel Gibson film The Patriot. That's the 500 episode, 25th of the 1st, 25, 12 noon, 34 Marchmont Street, London, WC1N1AP. Do come along to that. We've got a raffle. We're gonna have a quiz. We're gonna have loads of stuff going on.
It's not a ticketed event or anything like that. It's just like a gathering of like-minded comics folk who are just gonna have a laugh. We're gonna record episode 500 there live. Hopefully, all the equipment holds together.
It'll work. Yeah.
And the
We'll do the
battery on my
old
laptop.
we'll double bank it again, won't we? Have two
Yeah.
recorders.
I'm pretty sure I'm going to need a new laptop in the new year, so hopefully it won't die during the 500. But yeah, and there's just going to be lots of great people. Everyone is welcome. Like I say, it's not a ticketed event, but
it's not. We don't charge you to come in. It's just fuck me, nobody would come if we did that. But oh, can I just say happy birthday, Simon Russell? I think it's today as we record. And happy birthday to my buddy who will be featured shortly, Rachael Ball. She's got a birthday coming up.
Hey. Happy birthday. And hopefully some of you are looking forward to Christmas. As we said there, Fred was our last guest of 2024. And what a year 2024 has been. It's certainly been an interesting year. We've read an awful lot of comic books. So much so we need to go back and look at... mean, me and Dan always forget every year, and we have to comb the back catalogue of the year's episodes to find out and remember what we've read.
I forget what I said last week.
Yeah.
Let alone 6 months ago.
Yeah.
Dan's not good with names.
No. This year, there's 2 episodes left of 2024. Next week is our festive Christmas episode. Obviously, around Christmas time, if you just want to get away from the madness of the family of celebrations, etc., we're going to be talking about Christmas comics again. We've already picked one out, and it's something it's a little more indie centric, I would say.
Well, we've done Marvel and DC, have we now? So we're just doing something else now.
Yeah.
It's an evergreen one, this one.
So we did an X-Men, and then we've done Hitman, and now we're doing something else.
Yes.
Yeah.
So we're going to have a laugh there. We'll have a mince pie or two. Do you eggnog?
I've never drunk.
I've never done
drunk.
it. No.
I'm willing to.
I mean, obviously for our stateside listeners, etc., it's not as readily available over here. Is it something that's been?
I think you can buy it in off licenses now, can't you? I think you can buy it in Tesco and stuff.
But you can get it in Marks and Spencer, stuff like that.
Oh, I go Tesco, he goes Marks and Spencer.
Yeah, Marks and Spencer's. Well, I tell you what, Tony.
If I'm buying eggnog, I'm going to go to Marks and Spencer. I don't know.
Yeah, because
Tesco's
I don't know what it is about Marks and Spencer.
Tesco's
The food's always really good in M&S.
But pricey.
And well, you say that, but sometimes you're quite surprised. Like do you know what? If you wanted to get a big 4-pinter of milk, it's cheaper than Tesco's or something. Yeah, I think you'd be surprised. They don't sponsor the show, so fuck them.
I'll bring up my Christmas snack you always take the piss out of me for.
What, cock?
No, that's an all year round.
Fucking hell. That was Vince, by the way. That wasn't me.
that was quick.
It is a tasty snack.
I'm sorry, Dan.
no worries.
Dan's been getting it last.
I saw one of those
Instagram
videos, and it said if you had to give a dude a blowjob, would you rather do the 90% of it or the last 10%? And I was like, you don't have to think about these things. Don't think about it.
That went viral.
But no, the Christmas snack, a Pfeffernusen.
Pardon?
What's that?
I think Dan got some dust in his nose there.
Every year.
There, Dad. Did you sneeze?
That's definitely the name of the comic we're reading next week. Isn't that the title of it?
Break open the Pfeffernusen.
No, I'm not having it. What is that?
It's
like he's glitching because I can see the screen.
It's like a gingerbread kind of stuff. And you have it at Christmas.
Who are you this week?
That's not like do you get it from like Lidl's or Aldi or things like that, where it's like you get it in the hearts? They're like the gingerbread sort of. That's good shit, Dan. And what's it called?
Pfeffernusen.
I could listen to him say that all day.
I love a chocolate ginger. That's my favourite thing in the world.
Really?
They're not easy to find anymore, but they're nice.
I'll tell you what I love: Stollen.
Yeah.
Oh yeah.
But not the stuff with rum in it, just the straight up marzipan. Yeah. Food's always better when it's stolen. Yeah, there'll be loads of shit jokes like this next week, so get ready.
Secret ingredient is crime.
Yeah. I think we should pull crackers live on air.
Ooh,
We've got some girls coming around.
This is neither of these things have been me this week, so don't fucking give me shit online.
Okay. Right. Should we go around to the...
Do you know what squirrels... Do you know that all squirrels die after they have sex?
What?
Yeah. Well, the ones I fucked did. I needed to be in the gang of saying terrible things.
Okay, now, we are a very highbrow show. And absolutely none of this is going on the editing floor, so you're welcome, everyone.
Yeah.
We're going to bring this energy next week.
Yeah, but it'll be a lot more festive.
Yeah.
Never bite the hand that fingers you.
Yeah.
Jesus Christ! Jesus Christ! If this is your first time listening to this podcast,
we're really sorry, Fred.
Yeah, sorry,
I hope we
Fred.
didn't go partying.
Oh dear. But yes, like we're done for the shout-outs, aren't we? Should we just recommend?
Yeah.
We have lots of books to talk about this week. So add these to your wish lists. Possibly, you might be able to order some as gifts for your friends right now. I think the order deadline's still there, isn't it? You can still get.
I think
stuff
you still
before...
can't you? Stuff.
Still get stuff in.
Yeah. So what are we going to recommend this week? Tony, do you want to start us off?
I'll ask you guys a question because this one has a question mark at the end of it. Who can replace a man? This is an adaptation of a Brian Aldis short story by Laura Callahan, and I bought it at an Illustrators fair recently. Now it's not like who can replace men? Men. I think it kind of means mankind.
Mankind. Yeah.
Yeah, if you see what I mean. Are you guys an Aldis fan? You read any of the sci-fi?
I haven't. I must
Brave
say.
New World, is that
No.
Huxley?
Huxley, yeah, similar.
What's
He's an
Huxley
English
done?
sci-fi writer. I kind of think he was always a bit overshadowed by Ballard, who was a bit more sort of out there. But I think Aldis is really good. Frankenstein Unbound. I know there was a Corman movie made of that. And his other ones, which you might recognise from bookshop shelves, would be the Helconia books: Helconia Spring, Helconia Summer, Helconia Winter. They get brought up in those sort of SF masterwork books. But this, if you Google it, you can find this. It comes up almost straight away as a free-to-read short story. So I read this comic and then I went back and read the short story, and it's very close to the book. In fact, the huge chunks of dialogue are used. I'm going to say that the cover, I at first thought this didn't work, this cover, because it's just the words and the credits on the cover embossed in silver. And it looks to me like, it's hard to say, it almost looks like a slightly highbrow short book.
It's like a book the New Scientist would put out, that kind of thing.
Yeah.
Or
yeah.
or it looks like some book you find in Waterstones that talks about like something to do with learning IT.
I was going to say philosophy almost. Yeah, there's almost like a short.
The font choice is a little sort of like 90s computer.
Little bit, and that plays into the story, which is really interesting. I actually at first thought, I'm not sure about that cover, but I actually warmed to it very much so.
It's full embossed cover on the text, which
that's not a cheap option, is it?
No.
Yeah. This tells the story of an unfolding process of farm machine robots who become independent after they're ignored and, most importantly, untasked by the computer that runs them, and by extension, the people who run that computer, if you see what I mean. Slightly in the future, the farm machinery robots, who aren't R2D2 type robot, aren't C3PO kind of robots. They're
humanoids.
They're not humanized. They're blocky. They're just shaped in the shape for what they need to do, ploughing and this sort of thing. And they decide that they're going to go on a bit of a journey. And as with all this, similar to someone like Asimov, they have that. It's a very thought out, logical process of why they do stuff, and it plays into the mind of the robot. But what it does is, in stages, it makes them more independent. So they start traveling across the country, and they start thinking, well, we need to go here to find out this, and they start traveling. But through that process, they begin to learn they need power. They need to be able to go places where they can actually travel through. So it affects almost the human condition is forced on these robots as almost like growing up. And there's round them, you see destruction happening. So there's a plane that crashes over the top of them, and they learn that humankind is possibly becoming extinct around them. And where does that leave them? And it's got a twist in the end, as is with a lot of the short stories Aldis wrote, and we saw in the anthologies, New Worlds and stuff like that. It's got a twist at the end. But as all good, no, not all good, but some good science fiction, it is a metaphor for real life and a metaphor for human condition and stuff like that. And I found it very interesting. It totally works, and it works in conjunction with the prose. I think it's only a 6-page story, a short story to read. It's a very quick thing you can read, and this comic really does work. I know that Lara, because I met her at the Illustrators Fair, was telling me she's got the IP. She's actually got it through the family. He died a few years ago, I think, Aldis. So it's almost in conjunction with the family to do it, and it's really well done. I would say the artwork suffers a little bit from. To me, it looks like artwork that was intended to be coloured.
Okay.
but was left as black and white. And I think there's a couple of instances of using this solid black shape that is part of the narrative that plays into it. But I think it's only a small thing. I think maybe a little more rendering on some of the pages.
So it's kind of like tight outlines of everything, ready for it to be kind of dropped in and coloured.
You can see here you've got one of the robots and stuff.
Yeah.
I think maybe a little bit, but I think what she's trying to do there, I put words in her mouth, she's trying to have that coldness, that computer coldness of the robots in it. And it was just impulse. She was at the whip table, and I said, there's her and a friend there. And she said, oh, do you want one of the whip anthologies? And I said, look, it's nice meeting you both. Can I just have something that each of you has done? And she said, well, this is the newest thing I've got out, so I got this. But very good. You can go to Instagram. You can go to at Callag, CALLAG _documentality. She's also, as I say, part of the WHIP Work in Progress Comics Group, a group of London-based comic makers who meet once a month, and that's at WHIP _comics. I know Zach Cobb's part of that group as well.
Okay.
And they've got a website, whipcomics.co.uk. So it's called Who Can Replace a Man? Original story by human male Brian Aldis, drawn and adapted by human female Lara Callahan. There you go, that's quite nice. Yeah.
So if you was going to recommend me a book to go check out of that author, which one would you say I go for first, T?
I liked Hercules Unbound. I think the Helconia trilogy is good, like sort of fantasy sci-fi kind of thing. I'm just trying to think, I've got a book of his, I can't see it now, which is more of a...
Is that Frankenstein Unbound or Hercules Unbound?
Sorry, pardon me, Hercules Unbound. No, it's Frankenstein Unbound, sorry. Thinking of Fred Van Lente. Let me send you, there's almost like a straighter fiction, I'm trying to see it now, I can't see it, that he did. Let me send you the title later.
Okay, yeah, no worries.
I remember it, yeah. Yeah, there you go.
Nice. Dan, what have you got this week?
I've got two. One's a quick one. It was a gift which I foolishly opened early. I like to save Christmas gifts for Christmas morning. I'm a traditionalist like that. But I opened it up. It was sent through by my good friend Kieron Squires. He's also part of the...
We're seeing him in January, Kieron, aren't we?
Yeah, can't wait. It's going to be brilliant. And he sent me through a Spanish language edition of Danny Warren Johnson's Do a Powerbomb. And you're thinking, why did he send across the Spanish language edition? Because it's printed in oversized, black and white, no colour. And
anyone that knows that Daniel Warren Johnson's artwork will know that that's sometimes all you need.
Oh God, yeah. It's just...
I don't know why this isn't in English language. They should be doing this.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Just some of the stuff is just like, you look at it, it's just amazing. He's such a revelation of seeing his stuff. And when following on Instagram, and you see him post up stuff later, and it's just... I
remember me and Vander going through his... this is like 8, 9, 10 years ago, going through his portfolio in New York. I've got a picture of Vander pointing out it going, fucking hell.
Yeah.
Yeah, it's incredible. We need more of this, and I'll tell you why, because it's like a cheap version of getting an artist edition.
Yeah.
So you can see just the line.
Yeah.
Yeah, it's just amazing.
Storytelling wise, though, like a Do a Powerbomb is a great sort of wrestling book that he put out. And as we all know with Daniel's work, like there's so much heart. We'll talk about how kinetic and how the action and how it's unparalleled. You know, the stuff that goes on, the designs and everything. But it's always the heart of his stories and heartbreaking stories. Obviously, you read Do a Powerbomb anyway, haven't you, Dan? So, but in terms of the black and white art, when it's in a language that you don't necessarily know, how does like those emotional moments? How do they read when you're just looking at the art itself?
Just great. Like the character expressions are absolutely spot on. When something heavy's happening, you're drawn into it straight away. It's like it's doing that thing of being able to read a comic without having to read the words.
Yeah,
the artist is doing like the lot of the heavy lifting in the job.
Yeah,
and like it's all there. He's kind of he knows his craft, and for me, it's almost like a master craft in storytelling.
He's done almost like silent books, and when he did his like mini comics and stuff, like the fan ones for like Star Wars and
that Star Wars with
they were pretty much
mine are backed and boarded. Those ones, I tell you now.
Yeah, they can be rough.
Yeah, and there was a Pacific Rim one.
Yeah, I got that one.
Okay.
Yeah, good.
Yeah.
So he loves his stuff, and he's drawing it, and that energy and enthusiasm just explodes off the page. It's infectious. That brings me on to my second one. Going on to Global Comics. I've got to speed on Transformers, and Christ Almighty, the heart in that is unreal. It's just,
I need to catch up on that as well.
it's really the characters come in and they each one's got their angle and what they want to do and what they achieve, and you see the story playing out. It's really
the human
moving
characters are really important.
fun.
I don't think people talk enough about this with Transformers comics, because we look at the giant robots, but the human characters are massively important. Aren't
Human characters factor into it, big time. It's like they're part of the story. In without spoilers, there's part where Prime is like almost dying, and one of the characters sacrifices himself to keep Prime going, and from that point on, Prime starts seeing this guy's life overlaid with his when he's doing stuff. So like his connection to humanity in the world is a lot more succinct and personal, because like he sees like the guy's son being born, and he's holding him, and he's like these huge like robotic hands, and it's great. It's really good. I'd love to see where that's going, but you get characters introduced, and if you're kind of familiar with the characters in the story, you think, right, well, how's this going to play out? And then a couple of pages later, they're getting poleaxed, just absolutely taken to pieces, and it's just incredible. You're just like, oh, okay, it's because if you think like doing an IP comic, like what, none of these characters can die because we're selling fucking action figures of these. That's out the window.
We're
It's
almost
like,
beyond that point now, aren't we? With a lot of these franchises where a lot of the people who are reading them are the older generation who aren't going to buy the figures that are in their toy shops and stuff. You know, sometimes we are, but for the most part, they're just going to read the books, aren't they?
It feels like the comic for that audience, because we kind of, you've got knowledge of these characters and there's a weight to them. So when you're reading them as an older reader, you can kind of it's got something a bit for everyone. Like you can come in as a newbie and not know who these.
Yeah, I love learning about universes, and the Transformers universe has never attracted me before, but now it does. And I love coming in and learning out who's who and who's what, because I think sometimes we take things for granted too much, don't we?
Yeah, it's you can get it. Like there's one character and he's been tortured for 150 years. And you don't know what
is he married?
He is, and he's had all these kind of attributes stripped away, and he's kind of almost like a robotic skeleton that's absolutely just jammed up. And he gets rescued and come back, and he has a big intro sequence. Right now, we're going to start kicking some ass, and he fucking has a massive PTSD flashback. And it goes really wrong. So it's well worth getting back on board with. I really enjoyed it.
Just to be clear, the artist does change, doesn't it?
It swaps. I think Daniel Warren Johnson steps down issue 6 or 7. Let me see if I can get the guy's name up quickly.
Yeah, I think he needs crediting because he is good. Yeah, I'm going to say it's before that, man. I'm going to say it's 4, isn't it?
Maybe.
Yeah.
I didn't really notice straight away. I was like, oh Christ, the artist has changed. And the guy, although not quite up to Danny Warren Johnson's standards, but then again, who is, he does the job admirably. It's in the same sort of style.
It's an impossible job doing a Transformers comic.
Yeah.
It's fucking impossible.
Oh man, I couldn't do it. I was chatting to Zach Cobb about this the other day because he's doing a Transformer a day and posting it on the Slack, and Ian is like, it's like a load of boxes and all fitting together, and I couldn't do it, man.
I didn't find, when I did the September last year, I didn't find it too bad, but you have to keep going back and getting the reference to what they look like.
Oh, massively.
Because they're so detailed, and they've got their own thing going on. Right, the artist that takes over from Daniel Warren Johnson is George A. Corona. George, Jorge Corona. Yeah, I couldn't say how to pronounce that. But Danny Warren Johnson is still writing it, and he's still got that heart and energy going through it. And yeah, love it.
Does he come back later and do an issue?
I don't know. He's doing the covers still.
He still does the covers.
Okay.
We had a cover. There's that one where I'll hold up to the screen. Obviously, the views come. Do you remember that one? We
yeah.
Cover pics.
Yeah.
It's lovely stuff.
Yeah.
And Optimus Prime is still knocking around with Megatron's arm.
Nice. So yeah, I need to catch up on this. Okay, my pick, which is also like 2 books as well, actually. These are 2 from 2 written by Jeff Lemire.
Okay.
The first is Skulldigger and Skeleton Boy, and the second is the unbelievable Unteens, both from the world of Black Hammer. Okay, so just as Skulldigger came out in 2021, Unteens came out in 2022. I discovered them on Global this week because there's the collective volumes of them, and absolutely just churned through them. In fact, Skulldigger was the first one I
Okay, because
I
that's
read.
a later book, isn't it? I think that's maybe like the fourth or fifth book.
See, it could be. Now, this is what's going to... I said before the show, here's my recommends, and I'm going to have a question or two for Tony, because Tony's
Okay.
he's more...
I haven't read the second book. I haven't read the Unteens, which I'm guessing is like an X-Men type book, is it?
Okay.
Right,
I've got to
okay.
say, with that Skullboy, someone came up to me last week and said, "Have you seen this, Dan?" And I've said I've no idea who that character is.
You need...
It's almost like their Punisher analog, isn't it?
Yeah, you need to fucking read this one, Dan. This is
Okay,
right,
okay.
Skulldigger and Skeleton Boy. With the heart of the city at stake, a vigilante rises in Skulldigger. However, when the nefarious Grim Jim escapes from prison, will Skulldigger and his ward Skeleton Boy be enough to save Spiral City? This is Punisher / Batman. It's almost taken a sort of it's
With a sort of Halloween tint to it, almost.
yeah,
sort of,
yeah.
I mean the event of the day of Halloween, not that.
And there's this. It's a modern sort of story, but the heart of it and a lot of the spine of the story harkens back to the sort of Golden Age characters, because stuff that's happened in the past is, you find out you don't know who Skulldigger is at first, and he's just a brick wall of a person, has like sort of padded armor and stuff, and he's got like this skull like mask, which is just like visually. I will say I'm going to murder the name. Tonsi Zonyik is the artist.
I like his stuff. Yeah.
Fucking revelation.
Yeah. I got a page of his. Yeah.
Do you really? Fucking revelation on this book. This just because it came out of nowhere, and it's in terms of words and art being perfect together. This book just fucking blew me away. And like Skulldigger, his weapon of choice, he has like a chain which has like a metal skull on the end of it. So
Nice.
when he kills criminals, and he does kill criminals, because a lot of it is also a police investigation trying to catch up and stop him while everything else is going on. He literally brutalizes people. He just smashes them to pieces. And it starts...
Can I ask a question? Are these the only two bits of Black Hammer you've read?
Yes.
Okay,
which is
fine.
what I'm going to lead into in a second. So I started with this one, and I'll be completely honest, listeners and hosts, because it looked cool. I remember always seeing this and just thinking, that looks pretty cool. I'll have to check that out one day.
Sometimes that's all it takes.
Yeah, it
Pick
does.
up the
That
cover.
is literally all it takes. But the self-contained kind of story within just gave me everything I needed. Because it starts off with Skulldigger almost doing... He jumps in just after the Batman origin story has just happened. This kid has had his parents killed right from like by a mugger, and the mugger is then brutally murdered by Skulldigger in front of him, in front of the kid. And then later on, that kid, spoilers, that kid becomes Skeleton Boy. Because,
There's a little Stockholm going on there, isn't there?
Yeah, there's a little... Yeah. But I tell you what, and because of that, I thought I had this story pegged. I thought, oh, right, this is the Batman and Robin. It's a Batman and Robin using the Punisher model.
But also, I think there's a bit of Hit Girl in there as well.
Totally. There's a little bit of that as well. But what Lemire does, there is a human strand and heart going through this that pulled the rug out from me. Especially in the last... Have you read all of this one, Tony?
Yeah, that one I have, but it's a while ago. I read it as it came out.
And it totally sort of like... With these sort of stories, even when they're pulpy or superhero or whatever they are, there's a heightened world, isn't there? There's everything sort of like, whether it be the science or people coming back from the dead, or like people surviving weapon attacks that they really shouldn't attack. All of this going on. And what they do with the storytelling is they put a real reality to it. That sounds strange when you're talking about books about vigilantes and stuff, but the reality of it is how people feel and how people react and the choices that they make. And the stuff that happens in this, I was like, bloody hell, I think that's especially the last bit of the book. I actually felt I felt genuine human emotion at the end of this.
I can't remember what happens now. I just can't remember it. I'll have to go back and have a look.
It's so good, and
I bought the issues. So
the art is such a lovely collection as well. There's so many beautiful variant covers and stuff to this one. So I finished off with that, and because of that, I thought, oh, maybe there's something to this Black Hammer universe.
Yeah.
And then I stepped over to... I saw this strange-looking cover for the Unbelievable Unteens. Jeff Lemire again, writing it. I read the name Tyler Crook, and the light bulbs go off like, holy shit, Tyler Crook's doing this, from Harrow County, and just an abundance of wonderful books. This one, and you almost hit the nail right on the head, Tony, with what you said before. The synopsis for this one. After signing at a comic book convention, Unbelievable Unteens artist Jane Ito finds herself visited by one of the characters from her own creation. But was it her own creation? Were the Unteens an actual school of teenage misfit superheroes who battled supervillains under the lead of the mysterious Dr. Miles moniker? And if so, who wiped their memories and why? As Jane's world is turned upside down and she learns the true nature of her identity, she discovers a sinister plot leading to her to assemble a team she is suspected was purely fictional.
Oh, that sounds good. I'll give this a go.
This is, and it really does play in that, the classic sort of X-Men, the young superheroes. It's a young superhero team, but they're all like, there's a character who deals with like arcane magic. There's a colossus, someone who can turn their body to like diamond and metal and stuff like that. There's all these sort of different characters that you recognise, but they're fully formed individuals. And whenever we see their past exploits, it's in the style and the sort of tempo of old comic books. Because Tyler Crook does the real world modern stuff is inks and watercolours and things like that. But then it's more straight sort of pen and ink when he does like, even if you're talking about a flashback, because this is like someone discovering, they were a superhero. This stuff was real. Why does she not remember it? And why did the others not remember it? It's so well done. And it's another one. It just pulls out on the heartstrings. It deals with these big characters making these big decisions, and then someone going, well, hold on, this isn't how... You can't just run in and do this because you're causing more damage. And it deals with, like, there's a lot of romantic threads. When they were kids, they felt one way, and now that they're adults, like two of the characters meet, and when you see the flashbacks in the book, it was like young love. They were the two that quite liked each other. And when they meet now, one of them has moved on, they're married, they've got kids.
I think that's what a lot of what the Black Hammer universe does, is it's because it's based on, there's analogues in other... It started off with, obviously, the Justice League analogue. It subverts what we see in those original characters, and Lemire gives them almost like an indie comics twist.
And this is my question, and this is going to sound strange. I recognise the masthead of Black Hammer, but I always sort of like, it's not really my jam, it's not really for me, or something like that. And these two books were really a case of like, what have I been missing out on? For those who don't know, what is Black Hammer, Tony?
So it is Lemire breaking free of what he maybe has done quite a lot at DC and Marvel.
Yeah, he's worked DC, Marvel,
a very
Valiant,
prolific
he
kind
did,
of guy. Yeah. Black Hammer starts, if you look on the Wikipedia page, I've just checked, there's a reading order list, which, because it's not necessarily chronological, I think there's a Black Hammer, it's called Origins or something like that leads into the Black Hammer title that was the first thing that came out, which is where I started it. And it's almost like superheroes after a big cataclysmic event, and they're living on a farm. And one of the big characters has died, and there's these other characters going on, leading their own lives. There's conflict and stuff. Other things are happening. People are coming and going from it and stuff.
They do have these lovely sort of like the boxes of, the Star and Black Hammer 1, that kind of thing, tying into, that don't detract from the story you're reading. That's what I liked about it. I was like, I should check that out. Do you know what I mean?
It expands the universe from that Black Hammer story, but Dean Ormston does it. I think there was a delay. Dean did a certain amount, and then I think he had an aneurysm or something like that.
Oh god.
He's fine now, I think, but because he's a UK based artist, Dean. There's a documentary about him on Prime you can watch. And he takes it on, and he's very consistent through that Black Hammer original title, which I would massively recommend to you read.
Right.
My personal favourite of everything is Barbalian. So Barbalian is the Martian Manhunter analog, but it's got the added twist of Barbalian is an alien who is pretending to be a police officer. I think it's been a while since I read it, so please forgive me. I think it's San Francisco in the 80s during the AIDS epidemic, who is a gay man who not only has, because there's this obviously this metaphor of protecting his alien identity from people finding out, protecting his gay identity from stopping people finding out. When he reveals one thing, it frees him to do other stuff, and it's so well written.
Yeah,
it's one of the best things you'll read, and they're all
so,
different.
Yeah, the writing of these were just sort of like,
yeah.
One of the things that, and I think is for me. I love both these stories. You know, these could quite easily. They jumped to the top of like my pile of like, oh, wow, this really.
Man, get on the original series. I think it will explain a lot for you. I think.
Yeah, but I think the biggest selling point for me, these are from the world of Black Hammer, which is cool. I want to find out more, and I cannot stress this enough. Both of these titles, you don't have to read any of it to read one of them.
Yeah, same as Barbalian. You don't need to read.
Absolutely, I just jumped in. I thought, I'll check this one out because it looks cool.
Same as I think 45's like that. Yeah. The Frankenstein books like that.
Sherlock Frankenstein, isn't it? Which is the fucking best name ever. But that was the most impressive thing. It was sort of like, these are so good individually, standalone, that I want to find out more about the bigger universe, which is what it should be. It should be like, this works as a standalone thing because it's so good. You want to naturally.
I think it's also a university. Probably knowing how fast you read and how fast we read, you could read over Christmas.
Oh God!
You could read all of the Black Hammer books if you wanted over Christmas.
I read these two volumes, which are both like, you know, they're over 100 pages. You know, all said and done, they're like 150 pages each, and they're so easy to read. Jeff Lemire is like just a fucking legend.
And then, like we said last week, there's the Justice League. He's kind of almost come back on himself in the Justice League Black Hammer crossover, which is actually the best Justice League I've read for a while.
Yeah. So, you know, Unteens and Skulldigger, you know, the highest recommendation, but Black Hammer in general. If you're like me, who've just seen it on your periphery, and certainly, you know, there's talk of like the Eisner winnings and, you know, all of this stuff that, you know, critically acclaimed and stuff. Push all that to one side. There's just good comics. It's just really good comics that work on so many different.
It's also a little universe you can just read.
Yeah.
You don't have to worry about X-Men continuity for fucking 60 years.
I'm totally going to.
You can just read the Black Hammer.
I mean, I know I'm gonna the original one I'm going to read, but I think the first one I'm going to read is probably going to be that Barbalian after what you said, Tony, because that's fascinating. Seeing how that.
Really interesting. Yeah.
So that's my one. Tony, cool. Blimey, we're running long. Tony, sign us off.
So my final one is by my buddy. So this is a recommendation from Rachael Ball. It's the Patsy Papers. So let me read it. If you teach, have ever taught, have been to a school, or perhaps have had a bad boss, this comic is for you. And it's almost like, I don't want to say it's an ashcan because it's a bit more than an ashcan, but it's almost a teaser for a longer story that Rachel's been doing, something she's been working on. And in the back, Rachael teaches as well. In the back are some strips from some of her students, which is quite nice to see as well. But she had this, she only just got it printed up, and she had it at the illustration fair that was a couple of weeks ago. It's I don't know. It's different. If you've read The Inflatable Woman or Wolf, you'll have seen the black and white art that she does there. This is slightly different, and it's in color. She also uses. I really like the way she uses colored word balloons to indicate who's speaking, which I think is a nice little touch. Yeah. This is A5. Pardon me. I think this should be an A4 book. I think this should be a bigger book because I think her work really stands that hardback book treatment. It's part autobio and part fantasy, dealing with Rachel's experiences as a teacher working within secondary education. It, to me, deals with the power structure and the pupil-teacher, teacher-headmaster type dynamic. But in typical Rachael style, it's done in her. I don't mean this in any way rude. I mean it in a very complimentary way. Her quirky style, because she's got an individual idiosyncratic style to her work that suits the subject matter, suits what she does. So Patsy is a new trainee teacher at a school that it says on a sign outside, requires improvement according to Ofsted. And she meets a woman as she's going in called Vicky, who's also fairly new. And it's all a bit overwhelming for her. And she goes and sits in an assembly room where the head teacher, the new head teacher, comes out and presents to everyone like, we got rid of the last head teacher. He was the poison. We're now doing things differently. We're running the school as if it was a medieval school. And everyone's like, what? I don't know what's going on here. And behind the scenes, Vicky, this new girl who's met with Patsy, has dressed up as like a knight from the with like a big red cross and like a chainmail hood, and she doesn't get invited onto the stage to speak. And afterwards, the head teacher goes back and says, "Well, you never invited. It's my idea," like this. And you're left with this sort of weird moment where you can hear Patsy thinking, she doesn't. It's not written, but you can hear her thinking, "What have I got myself involved in?" So this is like this little teaser that comes out. I can't wait to see the whole thing. It looks great. I don't think it's for sale, but I'm sure if you reach out to Rachael, she'll probably sell you a copy. If you go to Rachael Ball Cartoons on Instagram, you can find it. If you go to www.rachael, R-A-C-H-A-E-L, RachaelBallCartoons.com, that's her website, and sign up to her newsletter. She's got a newsletter that comes out as well. Also, it gives you some information on some of the courses that Rachael's running, which are highly recommended. I've collaborated with Rachael a few times now, and we always love to work together, so it's more of a recommendation, but it really was good. I was really pleased with it. I know she said that she's literally only just got it back from Mixum. I think the thing is that Rachael and I have in common is we don't understand computers. So we had this conversation about it. She was quite impressed with Mixum, saying, "No, it's come back straight away and everything," but it's come back really nicely. So that's my second one, The Patsy Papers by Rachael Ball.
Nice.
There you go.
There you go. Tons of comics to check out, add to your wish list, read over the Christmas period, and more. And thank you again to Fred Van Lente for joining us this week. That was another fantastic chat. That gets us I don't know about you guys or you lovely listeners, just gets you enthused about comics, whether reading or
that really did, man.
It's infectious.
Yeah. So
I want a nice big Resurgence hardback I can read. Because the art is so detailed in that book.
Yeah.
So many things going on. Yeah.
That's another one to add to your wish list.
Yeah.
And there's many a wish list flying around as we're.
I don't have a wish list.
No?
You don't wish for anything, do you, Tim?
My Amazon wish list serves as my sort of books I want to get eventually. Basically.
Yeah, eventually.
Oh.
Yeah. It's just that if I forget about it, I add it to the wish list, and then eventually.
Yeah.
Oh, I must start doing that. Can other people see your wish list then?
No, you can make it private unless you want to share it with people. And I'll tell you what you should do. You should share this show with anyone and everyone. And because we love talking about comics, and we want lots of people to discover lots of comics.
We spend our lives promoting other people.
well, I also do other things in my life as well. Sometimes I eat toast.
This show's all about promoting people, isn't it?
Yeah.
Getting more people into comics, reading comics.
And making comics.
Following on from our pudding discussion, what's your favourite thing on toast?
Peanut butter.
Peanut butter's great.
Do you put margarine or butter on first?
Oh, if the peanut butter's good, you don't need it either.
Oh, interesting.
Yeah. I tell you what, though, if I have that,
I'm a big Marmite fan.
You know the peanut butter that has the oil that you got to mix before putting it on, really the posh shit.
I don't really get that stuff.
All the good stuff.
I trust
but if you put that on, sometimes it doesn't have the taste. So I drizzle a little bit of honey.
No.
Oh,
nice.
Lovely.
Someone told me about double toast during the week, and I've never heard this from anyone before.
What?
No, what's this?
Get 2 slices of bread, squeeze them together, toast it, so only the outsides of each one getting toasted, and then you make a sandwich on the inside and put your filling, and then boom.
So it's just like having a sandwich toaster machine, one of those toasting things. Yeah.
What the hell?
Who do you mix with? Who are you this week?
I'm going to try that, but first I'm going to make sure that my home insurance covers house fires.
Yeah.
And
I guess if you wanted to play it safe, give this grill one side of it, and then.
We're not about playing safe on this show.
If I do cheese on toast, I grill one side of it, and the other side I don't, and put the cheese on it.
What I do is I toast the bread first, put it under the grill, and then put the cheese on it.
Bit of mustard with the cheese, like it.
No, I can't stand mustard.
Or Liam Perrins.
Oh, what's wrong with you?
No.
I can't have that. It's got fish in it, isn't it? Yeah.
Speaking of
Animal abuser.
scintillating conversation, let us know what you want us to discuss more in
You
upcoming
made the
episodes.
fucking squirrel joke.
And as this show tears itself apart from the very inside, please let us know what you want us to talk about in future episodes. You can do it several ways. You can email us awesomecomicspod@gmail.com. You can follow us on social media at awesomecomicspod on Instagram, at the awesomepod on X. Thank you for listening to us, whether it was on the website awesomecomics.podbean.com. If you listen on Apple Podcasts, subscribe and leave us a review. Helps get the word out about the show and everything we talk about on a weekly basis.
Thanks for doing any reviews you had so far. Lovely stuff.
Yes, and thank you no matter where you heard us, on Spotify, Amazon, Stitcher, Podnose, Podknife. What other networks we on, Tony?
We're on the network that relates to, I overheard a conversation by two lady secretaries who work at Dan's place this week, and one of them said, he dresses so well. And the other one said, and so quickly.
Oh, dear.
That's an old joke.
Yeah,
I like it.
Yeah. But where can people find us online, etc., Tony?
Neveronanything.com.
Nice. Dan?
You can find me on Twitter at Vanguard Comic, and you can read Vanguard at vanguardcomic.com.
Nice.
Fuck that up. I've only been
No,
saying
but
that for fucking maybe 10
still
years.
almost 10 years. God bloody hell.
Yeah.
That's a celebration we've got to plan after the 500.
Coming soon.
And you can find me on social media at Just a Diablo. Thank you very much, everyone. Next week we'll be getting ready for Christmas, so get wrapped up warm, have your hot chocolates
I'm
ready.
excited.
Oh, Christmassy already?
Yeah. I haven't brought my tree up yet.
No? Okay.
No, I don't put it up to Christmas Eve.
Are you going to put it up yourself?
Perv.
Well-oiled machine, that's what we are.
Yeah.
Anyway,
You're going to buy your Christmas tree and you're looking at the guy waiting for him to say it. You're going to say, we're going to put it up? No, mate. Just take it and get out.
Just don't. Just get out.
Get out.
Get out. So get out, you crazy kids, and join us next week for more fun. Until then, from Tony, Dan, and myself in ACP Towers, have a wonderful week. Read loads of comics. Keep making loads of comics. And what else should they do, guys?
Stay awesome.
Stay awesome.
See ya.
Bye.
Bye.